So welcome everybody for our online masterclass with Catherine Vid, who is a coach of career ambitions. We're so lucky to have Catherine here today to talk through career and how we can navigate our next steps to get to where we want to, because Catherine's got over 25 years plus experience in recruitment and career management. So if you've got any career questions, Catherine's definitely the woman for you. And we're in a small group, which is really lucky. So you'll get more one-on-one time with Catherine today. And we've got her for 1 hour. So I'm Lily, I'm the founder of the Rising Network. I know loads of you are familiar with who I am. So welcome, great to see you familiar faces today. We've got an hour, like I said. We want to make it very interactive. Catherine would love to hear your feedback and your comments. So do use the Zoom chat box during her talk if you've got any questions or comments. And there's a couple of polls as well, some questions that Catherine's designed to get you thinking a lot more about where you're at and where you want to be. And we've put some time at the end for Q&A. And we'll do our best to finish sharply at 1 o'clock. It's a beautiful day, and I know lots of us want to get out there as soon as this finishes. So the purpose of today, the aims, we hope that what you'll learn is what you can do, what you can control and reframe. So whatever situation you find yourself in, you're moving closer to wherever you want to be in the context of your career, how you can stand out and how you can increase your visibility and impact. And even how do you leave that lasting impression? So when you're not in the room with those people, how can you always remain in the forefront of their mind? And finally, practical steps that you can take to get closer, to get things happening in your career, to get to where you want to be.
Thank you very much, Lily. And to all of you who've joined us, Genevieve, I believe, is going to be back a little bit later. She's having a few little issues. It's absolutely wonderful to be here, and I'm going to be talking to you today about how to get your career moving again. I'm not sure if many of you have found that COVID and this talk of pandemic has just seemed to put your career on hold, or I talk to people constantly who's saying, you know, I just feel a sense of malaise, and I've got a lack of space where I'm working. I have extra childcare responsibilities. I just don't feel that I can do a really good job in my career, and I'm feeling a little bit invisible. So this is designed to help you to reassess and get going again. Now, I'm just a little bit about me. I'm a career management coach, and it was actually in the last recession of 2008 that I founded my business, Career Ambitions. I'm very accustomed to my clients going through major career change or turning points, and often the changes they're going through are quite unexpected and not of their choice. And when I started Career Ambitions in that last recession, I don't know if any of you went through it as well, I got involved in a response to redundancy scheme and traveled the length and breadth of the east of England to help people deal with suddenly losing their jobs. And what I found was really interesting. Everyone has a unique situation to deal with, but some people are able to face those challenges of losing their jobs with a positive mindset. But others I found it really, really hard. And because of this, they couldn't move on, and it severely impacted their ability to find another job. So I work with clients going through all of these emotions, and also people who want to take a step up in their career and make the most of all their possible future selves. I use language and behavioral profiling, which is a psycholinguistic tool to help people figure out what those unconscious motivations are. And today, before we get down to ultimately how you can accelerate your career, I'd like for us to take a step back and firstly think about what has COVID been doing and how has it impacted the world of work internationally. So that's that strategic step back. And then we'll be looking at who could your future self be, and how confident and competent are you feeling to take that step? And if you, wherever you are on that continuum, how can you become more visible? And then I will leave you with some actual steps you can take to accelerate your career. I've allowed some time at the end for Q&As, and Lily will monitor the Q&As. But if you have a burning question that I can answer along the way, please just pop it into the Q&A. So where are you in your career cycle? It would be great to know, and this brings us to the first poll. Which of these first describes you? If you could pop into the poll that Lily's going to get up for us, where if you early stage in your career, mid-stage, mature stage, perhaps you're returning after a bit of a career break, or in education. We've got quite a mix. Yes, so we've got, most of us then have been in our careers for just a little while, or re-educating. So I think we can end the poll now and share those results. So thank you. That's really useful for me to understand where you are. Now, I've been talking a lot about career, but what is the difference between a career and a job? Now, for me, a job is something that's a bit more transactional. It gives us something. It gives us money. It gives us a sense of security. It pays the bills. Whereas a career is much more of an emotional investment. It's almost a sense of our own identity. It's a means of achievement. It can make us happy. It can build our self-esteem, which is why it's absolutely important to get it right. So if it's something that we're doing because it gives us a sense of purpose, we can then look ahead more intelligently and hopefully avoid some bad scenarios. And I don't know, those of you who've been in your careers for a little while, I've certainly looked back and think, gosh, I've had some jobs that I would rather not have had, but it's helped me now be much better at thinking what I do next. Which brings me to that traditional career cycle where we felt that it has three main stages. We've got this bit of education, which it's a big investment often in early life to prepare us for our career. And then we've got our career, mid, late, or we're establishing our careers, and then we retire. So it used to be that it was nice and neat, age of 16 to 65. It had a defined start and an end point. But it's not like that anymore. In fact, we probably only have two main transitions: education to work and work to retirement. It used to be that if we knew someone's age, we knew their stage, but now we're out of lockstep. And years ago, when I was a headhunter, I was taught that if somebody was earning slightly more than their age, then that was good. That was a sign of success. But now we can re-enter and go back and forth. It's all changed because our careers have got so many twists and turns. And this pandemic, with the talk about those twists and turns, in itself has created so many new jobs. Just on LinkedIn, a post that went viral, not sure if any of you saw it, was a chap called David said, "I'm so proud of my wife, Karen. She has been sitting and determined to get a job. She applied for 300 jobs because she'd had to close her beauty-related business due to the pandemic. She'd even gone and packed boxes over Christmas at Amazon, And she was eventually found a job and is now retraining as a COVID vaccinator. And who would have thought COVID vaccinator, that there'd be such a job? And they probably will continue to exist because this pandemic means that this virus isn't going to go away very quickly. What does, therefore, lie ahead of us in the world of work? There have been so many societal and technological shifts. And to know how to navigate and accelerate this, let's look at the bigger picture of the pandemic. Basically, secure employment has, the concept of secure employment has become quite rare, but the pandemic has accelerated that. The gig economy is on the rise. It means that there are fewer permanent jobs and many more changes as well as opportunities. Because we're leading these multi-staged, longer lives, it's essential that we manage our careers rather than our careers manage us, or waiting for an employer to say, would you like to go on a course, or is this an opportunity that you might be interested in? Lockdown and social distancing has done something really positive. It's broken down massive professional barriers between our working lives and our home lives. We can now have a much more flexible, blended approach to navigating these different worlds. And as we rebalance that, it is possible to have it all. Age doesn't matter. If we look at the Queen at 94, Captain Sir Tom Moore, who at 99 and just before he died, 100, achieved so much. As long as we stay healthy as we age, it doesn't matter what you're doing, at what stage. As long as we feel fulfilled, we are healthy, we can be productive. And tech automation and AI is not going to replace humans. That's just a bad news story. It means we don't have to do the heavy lifting anymore, but it's opening up so many opportunities and possibilities to use our uniquely human skills. With that in mind, and that much bigger picture of what the pandemic has actually done for us, who could our future selves be? And this is where I'd like to ask you just to take a little bit of time to reflect. And if you'd feel you'd like to share in the chat, it'd be wonderful. If you had no fear, what would you do? If you had no fear, what would you do? That's quite a thought, isn't it? So my chat just disappeared for a minute.
I'll read some out for you, Catherine.
Thank you so
I
much.
had a little laugh here. Zoe says, plan A was to marry a rich man and have dogs. Nicholas said, I'd try a lot more things on a regular basis. For me, mine was writing my book and launching more businesses. We've got Zoe. Oh, Zoe's got a plan B, which is to head up the link between employment and education. Not sure what that says, Zoe. Head up the e-link.
The e-link, I see that, yes.
Yes. And then Amelia says traveling. Genevieve, not sure yet. Genevieve, have a little think about that.
Yes. Sounds exciting. You know, there's so many things. If we had no fear, what would you do? And somebody asked me this the other day, and I was quite astounded because there's so many things that I feel I've achieved and done. And yet it makes you think, what is holding us back from doing what we could be doing? And often it's this confidence and competence. We're torn between the two. If we just think of that word confidence, we might in our careers be thinking, can't possibly do that. Maybe that's where the fear comes from, and that's underconfident. Or we might feel quite confident, or in fact, we could be a little bit overconfident, a bit presumptuous when we have an excessive belief that we can do something. And then if we look at competence, we might not know what to do, so we're incompetent, we could be competent, or more than competent. Again, this is another poll. I'd really be interested, where would you rate yourself? If you think of that confidence scale, where would you put yourself right now when you think of your career? Are you underconfident, confident, or perhaps overconfident in some aspects? Underconfident. Okay. Confident. Yes. And none of us are feeling necessarily overconfident. Thank you. That's great. So majority feeling potentially a little bit underconfident. And then if we think about where you think you are on the competence scale, where would you put yourself in terms of your career? Do you feel incompetent, competent, or more than competent? Okay, so we have incompetent and competent. Anyone else? Great. I think almost everyone's there, so thank you. As you can see, most of you are feeling competent, but more of you were feeling unconfident or less than confident. Now, the reason for asking you these questions is because when we encounter somebody new, we actually evaluate people just in two dimensions. And we ask ourselves, can I trust this person? Or can I respect this person? And psychologists refer to these dimensions as warmth and competence, respectively. Now, ideally, we want to be perceived as both. But Amy Cuddy, who some of you may have heard of, and I'll tell you a little bit more about her shortly, she says that most people in a professional context believe that competence is more important than confidence. But whilst competence is highly valued, it's only established after we've established that trust with somebody. So if we focus too much on displaying strength, it can backfire because we can come across as seeming to be far too smart, too competent, and we can skip out on having those social interactions with people and not asking for help, and therefore just come across as perhaps being unapproachable. And a book you might be interested in reading is Amy Cuddy's Presence. She's also done an amazing TED Talk or two. She did some research along with Susan Fiske and Peter Glick. And in all cultures and contexts, when we encounter strangers, we tend to size them up using that evolutionary instinct to survive, which is, are they a friend or are they a foe? And how dangerous are they as a foe or helpful as a friend? which brings us to this loop, continuum, whatever you want to call it, where so many of my clients come to me because they may lack confidence in promoting themselves. Often on CV, they'll say, oh, I hate selling myself. When it gets to an interview, they really struggle to put across their attributes, what they're capable of. And confidence comes in so many guises. So whilst people may seem to be underconfident, I know a couple of you had said in the poll, you were feeling a little bit underconfident. It doesn't mean that you're not competent or ambitious. And this is where I like to get very specific with my clients. When is it that you're not feeling particularly confident? Or who is it with? I know that I have certain triggers where I used to feel my heart would start beating, but once I figured out that's a trigger and that's what's happening, it was so much easier to deal with it and build confidence in that particular aspect. And then when we get more competence, we work on it, we get more experience. For example, when I'm doing mock interview training with my clients, they inevitably become more confident. And that's the loop that's keeping it all together, is that learning, growing, and experiencing. Because confidence has got two faces. We have this external face, particularly in Western society. We tend to think that confident people are more charismatic, extroverted, and socially skilled. And in fact, in most cultures, these are all regarded as quite desirable features to have. And secondly, in almost all cultures across the world, we tend to equate confidence with competence. So we automatically assume that confident people are also more able, skilled, and talented. Whereas you may have an internal face of confidence where you can be feeling really confident, but you don't have a need to project it to others. Now, something really interesting in some research that's been done is that competent people are generally more confident, but confident people are generally not competent because they are good at hiding their incompetence and insecurities, and they often deceive themselves. So the correlation between confidence and competence is very low because it acts as a detractor. Most people who interview very well, and I do quite a lot of interviewing still because I sit on panels, if I wasn't able to actually seek out evidence or information to back up that outward looking confidence, I might just assume that they're great. In reality, what they're doing is really just charming the interviewers. I wondered if you could put in the chat, have you ever been given any of this advice to give you confidence? When you say, oh, I'm not feeling so good about it, people say, love yourself no matter what. Or if you think you're great, you are. Don't worry what people think of you. Have you ever been given that kind of advice? Okay, so thank you. Nicola, you've been mentioned about competent and underconfident. I'm just going through the chat. Yes.
Nicholas, affirmations are great, but it's a challenge to keep saying it, to believe it.
Okay, I'm there. You've made a good point there. And this is just exactly what I was getting at, Nicola, because we can tell ourselves something, but if we're not feeling it, then what's the point? It's then that sense of being overconfident rather than actually confident. And this is definitely the danger, because if we try to fool ourselves and other people, then as Thomas said in this, and I'm not going to pronounce his surname because I probably wouldn't get it right, in this amazing quote, is you might start to think that you're actually better than you are. And that leads to overconfidence or that false sense of confidence. And I know in my earlier career, I had a sense of brittleness. I would be what I wanted other people for me to be, but I never necessarily felt it inside of myself. We really need to try and build that inner confidence. And along with that is something that I wish that we would seek out more actively, especially when we're interviewing and I sit on these panels and I see other of my panel members being taken in by people being overconfident, is this sense of real humility. It's a massive leadership attribute, but all of us can be quietly confident and quite modest and let other people maybe have a little bit of the limelight every so often. We don't have to be pushy, but there are ways where we can show our quiet confidence. And I love this by Lolly Daskell, this amazing quote. And I think it just sums it up. That confidence believes we're able, whereas competence knows you are able. What we've talked about in terms of our careers having been put on hold, wanting to kind of restart and reset them, is we've looked at that bigger picture. We've then looked at some of the things that might hold us back, such as our levels of either confidence or competence. But now we need to think about, how are we going to raise our heads above the parapet? How are we going to start to be a little bit more visible out there? And so much has been talked about a personal brand. And I often think, is it a career fad or a must-have? But let's just look at some of the definitions of having that sense of identity. And that is, if we do have a sense of self in terms of our professional selves, we can increase our presence and impact in what we're doing. We can then showcase our unique combination of skills. But my favorite, and this is the one where I really think it's important, is to be much more intentional about what we want to be known for. And this is one of the things that very few people with a strong career brand or those moving towards wanting to have a personal brand don't realize, is that the benefits for an employer of you having a strong brand and sense of identity is so underestimated, because people buy from people, essentially. And when you as an employee represent your company at, let's say, a conference or at an event, you're not only presenting and developing yourself, but you're also providing that organization with more exposure. And this will lead to them acquiring more customers or retaining existing ones, because you are the person that they're buying from. You viewed as trustworthy, as we heard from Amy Cuddy. You're a specialist potentially, or you're a thought leader. And the concept of having that personal brand emerged, I think it was in a Wired article way back, it seems forever ago, in 1997. And it was called The Brand Called You by Tom Peters. And he argued that the internet provided an ideal new platform for building our reputations and defining ourselves. That everyone has a chance to stand out. Everyone has a chance to learn, improve, and build up their skills. So therefore, we are all worthy of having a brand that is worthy of remark. And I'm certainly not going to be arguing with the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos. Your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. I think that's amazing. So I wondered if you could think about your brand, your career brand, on a scale of 1 to 5. Where do you think it is? If you could just perhaps pop into the chat, or if you would like to unmute yourself and just say where you think you are in terms of your brand. Zoe, a 2 to a 3. Great, thank you. And Nicola, a 4, that's pretty good. Yes. Anyone else? Amelia, that's such an good that you're still discovering your brand. That's brilliant. So a 1 and a 2, you've got quite a lot there to work towards. But thank you. And I like, Zoe, what you've said about becoming much more intentional about getting it to a 5. If I can help you with that process of getting it where you want it to be, perhaps you could ask yourself some of these questions. But if you do have a job description, please just forget it. A job description doesn't define us. Ask yourself, what do you do that is remarkable, measurable, adds unique value? And this should represent a combination of your skills and experiences that are unique to you. And then also ask yourself, is there anything that you've done lately to make yourself stand out? Now, it might be that you haven't, and that you need to. And I noticed in the chat, thank you for your comments about your brand being somebody that you can be kind and you're most proud of helping people. That's a wonderful comment. And that does make you stand out. People remember that because, as we now know, it's that warmth that make people trust you. So Genevieve, you're definitely on the right path there. Let's look at internal and external career brands. So many people think I need to have this career brand when I'm looking for a job. But let's think about internally inside of an organization. There are often some very small, slow, and subtle ways that you can show off your brand. And an amazing example that I had fairly recently is I mentor somebody called John. I'll call him John for now. And he's taken a big step up in his career. And because they're UK company has merged with an American organization. When they're on these Zoom meetings, people will say, "Oh, hi, John, you the guy from Cambridge." And he repeated this to me. And I was saying to him, do they know that you are the guy from Cambridge who created the Halo operating system? Because that system is what is making the company a huge amount of money and is taking them now into the future. So now he's actually added that, saying, "Hi, I'm John, the guy from Cambridge who created the Halo operating system." And now they can place him and know who he is in a meeting straight away. So that's been very powerful. Then if we think about external career brand, I mean, this is just huge. If you're trying to land, let's say, a higher position in an external company that you're going for, you could be showcasing some key data, such as the number of followers you have on some of your social media, the traffic your personal website gets if you have a personal website. And it gives you a real competitive advantage over other candidates. So I sometimes think about these things are almost, remember the old days where we used to give those business cards pre-COVID, where we could actually meet people, we'd give someone a business card. Well, now we can do this digitally. So I'm aware that we've been talking about brand. We've talked a lot about confidence and competence. And we've also talked about that bigger picture. I'm just going to pause again to look a little bit at the chat. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences in the chat. And Genevieve, something that you said just has popped out of me, and I would like to mention it, is that what your mentor taught me is to be the best thing in my life and always help those and remember those who are and were kind to you. So kindness is the key, and that your grandfather was your biggest role model. Isn't that amazing? So Lily, you've also asked the question is, oh, sorry, Nicola, what if you don't have a website? Would you recommend using LinkedIn to elevate your profile? Absolutely. LinkedIn must be the best free career management tool out there. I'm a massive proponent of LinkedIn. And just a quick tip on LinkedIn is that so many people say to me when I start working with them, I'll just take my CV and then quickly populate LinkedIn, and suddenly the two things look so similar. And I think, well, what a waste. What's the point? Your LinkedIn is your career brand, it's your personal brand, and it allows people to almost see 3 dimensions of you. And you can put in so many visuals, you can speak in the first person. And I'm always attracted to those about sections or summaries on your LinkedIn profile where somebody actually says, I'm passionate about whatever it is, changing the world. And I've done this by studying environmental science. And my ideal job would be going to the Amazon forest and doing whatever. Immediately they've told a story and it engages one. Now, we don't tend to do that on our CV, which is that removed, impersonal third-person way of writing. So LinkedIn is just amazing. So thank you for bringing that up. And I think in the Q&As, we're going to have so much to talk about. But before we do get to those Q&As, I'd like to share with you some practical steps to make things really happen in your career now that we're starting to hopefully come through the pandemic. It's not over yet, but here are ways to kickstart your career. Build your confidence by building that competence first, because then it's coming from a genuine place. However, I would say is don't wait and think, oh, I need to just be that extra bit competent before I feel confident. We need to get the balance right. And then think a lot about how to add value. And this is where I'm always asking the clients that I'm coaching to take a step back. We can be so in our own heads, we can have so much tunnel vision that we're not thinking about what is the company's objectives and what can I do that's going to actually make the most impact. And hopefully along the way, you will also be able to make an impact about something that's important to you, but it needs to be impactful for the organization. And that learning, constantly learning, you here today, and you are already investing in yourself. Hopefully, there are going to be a few things that you can take away to take that leap in your career. And so often, my clients say, I've been on this course, I've been doing that, but I don't yet feel confident that I can do it. But how often do we actually do a little audit of how much we've learned? I tend to, it's become a habit now, at the end of every week, I think, so what webinars have I been on? How have I stretched myself? How have I grown? What have I learned from my clients? I learn something new every day. Write it down. And then you will soon see if there are genuine gaps or if it's just that imposter phenomenon that Lily was talking about at the beginning that is creeping in. And then, Genevieve, you've nailed it there with your comments. Thank you. Is that warmth, that friendliness that you've been talking about. Build trust with others, but above all, be genuine, be yourself. It's absolutely exhausting when we're not ourselves and we feel we've got to be this professional persona. I know I've been there, and it's just such a relief at this stage of my career where I can just now be me. And I mentioned to you earlier that I'm fascinated as a specialist in language and behavior. I often listen to people's language and I hear the words no but. I can't do it, or no but something will happen. Change your language just by saying yes and is much more enabling than your brain hearing the no, but it's a real barrier. And the final is absolutely crucial. We can live in our heads, we can think about things constantly, but just do. Take action. Even if it feels uncomfortable, just do it. So we now have time for Q&A, and I'm going to switch off. And that wonderful chat that you've been doing has popped up. It was a little bit disguised on my screen, so I do apologize if I wasn't coming back to you as often as I'd like to have.
Thank you, Catherine. That was such an informative talk there. There were some questions that came up. I know Zoe had a couple that she was asking in the comments. So there was a couple, Zoe. I don't know if you want to pick one.
Yeah, I can't remember what my questions were, but I do have questions, always have questions. So I guess my biggest question at the moment is, I work for, as a civil servant, work for a government department that hands out funding for innovation. And it's great, and we do some amazing work. But I know now that what I really want to do is move into building that bridge. And I'm afraid it was a typo earlier, building that bridge between education at all levels and what industry needs. So what education is currently providing at the moment and what industry needs, they are at a bit of a mismatch. So I really want to get involved in that. I don't necessarily know exactly what it looks like yet, but I know that that's what I want to do. So I'm working very intentionally to build a stakeholder network, to ideas on how to raise my profile. One concern I have, though, is that I don't really want my boss, who knows I'm involved or interested in skills and knows that I am volunteering for working with the school, but I don't want them, the people that I work with at the moment, necessarily to know that I am very actively looking to work towards getting myself a job which will be outside of the organisation in the area that I want to be. So how do you build that visibility and that profile without basically saying to your boss, yeah, I'm going to be leaving soon?
Such a good question, Zoe. And it's a balancing act, absolutely. However, what I would say is that if you genuinely passionate about education and whatever you're doing, I would highly recommend that you talk about it, that you still put it on your profile, and perhaps at work, or you could even put it under volunteer experience. You could be talking about what you're doing on a voluntary basis. Because if they don't recognize how that they could potentially tap in to some of those skills and passions that you have, then it's obviously not going to be the right place for you. And maybe you've realized that. You don't necessarily want them to know. But if you're hiding it and you're feeling you're having to do it on the quiet, you might start thinking, what if I get found out? Because you're not ready yet to make a leap. And the right opportunities haven't come. And by way of example, I will perhaps answer it. I had a client that I've worked with whose whole identity was wrapped up in this particular organization that he worked in. He had a strong personal brand, but it was all about them in the audio industry. And they eventually, things changed, they pushed him out, and he went through a massive downer because he felt he was this organization. How could they have done that to him? And when he came to see me for coaching, we had to start building up this sense of who he was. And he thought, okay, I'm a great marketing person, but only in the audio industry. And he had this limiting belief. But by actually starting to go way back to what drives him, what his passion is, he started to think, I can do marketing in any industry. And he started to build up on LinkedIn. He's got this amazing sense of humor. He created all sorts of cartoons. He did these analogies online. And more people, when he posted something, started coming back to him and saying, we really like that. We think you're brilliant. And then eventually, when he'd been for several interviews, he'd been turned down, he started to think, I could just become a consultant because I've got a lot to give. Now, that process took a year. But then what happened? He no sooner got a personal website, thinking of setting up as a consultant, when he saw his dream job. He thought, I'm not even going to bother with a cover letter. He sent off his CV. They interviewed him. He thought of it as a business discussion because he had nothing to lose. He had a strong sense of who he was. He knew what he could offer. And then he was the 15th person that they interviewed, and they knew within 30 minutes that he was the right person for them. So I've said to him, what was different? He said, I was thoroughly enjoying myself, the whole interview process. And I felt I could pick and choose. And then the second question that I said to him is, what does your CEO think of the fact you've got a strong personal brand? And he said, they love it because they see it as powerful. They see it that on LinkedIn, etc., I can do something. So by way of a longer answer and demonstration, Zoe, is my advice would be is you may not be ready yet to make a move, but just keep building and going for it and raising your visibility and being intentional. And those opportunities will come. And you might be surprised, your current organization might actually think it's very valuable and not mind it. I don't know.
Well, it's funny actually, because when you talk about the reputation, Jeff Bezos was saying that your reputation is about what people say behind you, well, when you're not in the room. And I didn't think that, I mean, I do talk about how much I read and how much I study. I do talk about it a lot, but I didn't really think that many people listened. And yesterday I had an email from a colleague I've never met saying, oh, somebody else said that you were really into management development stuff, so I'd like to pick your brains. And so you're right, it's just that slow thing, isn't it? I'm just too impatient, that's my problem.
Oh, well, Zoe, all the best with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have time, Lily?
Yeah, let's go for it. I know Nicola, during your talk, made a comment around kind of the fear factor around suggesting ways to progress with ideas, but not being listened or overlooked. Nicola, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Yes, thank you, Lily, and thank you, Catherine, for the session. What was I saying? So it was when we were talking about kind of being confident, and it was how I kind of had labeled myself as maybe feeling a bit more underconfident. And I think that's because often when you try and, because I believe I do have the confidence and the knowledge, the experience, and you might bring forward some ideas and things, but often it kind of doesn't really get considered or gets overlooked in some ways. So it's, yeah, that kind of has led to me feeling less confident and being more frustrated and kind of thinking, well, it's not really worth it, you know, putting forward all these ideas if I'm not getting listened to. And so it's not so much of a fear of saying stuff, it's kind of saying stuff and not being listened to. So I know that's more of an issue maybe with somebody else than with me, but I'm wondering how I can kind of proactively make myself stand out that bit more and be listened to.
Is it that you not being listened to by certain people, or is it in certain situations?
I think it's probably more certain people that I'm experiencing more regularly.
Yeah. So. And that's where it's quite interesting, because we tend to try and motivate or influence people the way we like to be motivated. And what we really need to be doing is speaking outside the other side of our mouths. So if I explain that a little bit, is if we, for me, for example, I tend to have quite a quiet way of approaching people. I'm a listener. I will tend to ask an open question and then encourage conversation. Now that works well as a coach. But when I'm going in to do business development and I'm meeting a very busy decision maker, that's not going to work. So what I tend to do is mirror and match a lot. And I listen to their language. So I might speed up, be quick, short, sharp sentences, be much more visible, you know, use my body language, actually change and mirror and make them feel that they're talking to someone like themselves. And then eventually I will start to lead them and maybe quieten down and open a question. But as soon as I hear people speaking very, very quickly and wanting action and so on, I tend to do exactly that. So it's about adapting to other people and trying to think, you know, how are they experiencing the world or this particular place? And what do I need to do to get on their wavelength? So I hope that's useful for you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
Zoe has a question for you, Nicola. How strong is your internal network? Perhaps there are other people who could support you. Don't know if Zoe want to expand on that or with your ideas.
Yeah, so as I say again, read another book. So I read a book by Mae Bush called Accelerate Your Career, I think. It's only a really thin book, but she was talking about mapping out all your internal stakeholders so that you are able to approach different people in different circumstances to try and build a support network behind your ideas. So there are influential people that are, you know, for example, if you were sitting in a meeting and there were 10 people in there, if you've got 3 people that can really help you to promote that idea, that can help to get that idea lodged in the minds of the people that you feel are listening.
Thank you. That's really good advice. Actually, I've taken note of the book, and I've kind of, I think I'm quite good at building networks. And so that's kind of one of the things I would have said was kind of a personal brand strength, but it's about maybe utilizing that a bit more then. And I can see that with the advice from Catherine and mirroring and trying to, yeah, see through the eyes of the other person then, or people, and progressing that way. Thank you.
Right, well, we're at 1 o'clock. So before we go, Catherine, Zoe, you're going to love this one. Can we get a book recommendation out of you, please, on this subject? Something that you feel that you recommend to your clients when you coach them, or something that you is a must read for us all if we want to develop this.
So many, and I read so much, and I'm looking around my desk. I mean, there's a book that does leap out at me and might answer your questions, particular, Nicola. I don't know if any of you working across different cultures. And it's called The Culture Map by Erin Mayer. I'll put it in the chat. I have been glued to this book because I'm so fascinated by, we assume that just because we're all speaking English, that we're on the same wavelength. And this book is so accessible. Erin Mayer's done several YouTube videos, and you know, it just helps you understand that someone in the US is in a low context environment, so they need things spelling out to them. Whereas we here in the UK, we've got a unique sense of humor and just never assume about others. So that is been my favorite. But you can see behind me, I've got a massive bookshelf. If you'd like to link into me, please do. And I'd be very happy to share some other books and bits of advice with you.
Catherine, thank you so much for that informative talk, and thank you everyone for joining us. I know it's a really sunny day and lots of you want to get going, so on that note, have a great week, and we hope to see you soon at our next event. And thanks again everybody for being part of it, and to Catherine.
Thank you, it's been wonderful. Enjoy the sun.